talking about betrayal, abandonment, and broken trust. And we all have hundreds and thousands of those experiences growing up in what is called the relational matrix of child and mommy and daddy. Now, if mommy and daddy, or mommy or daddy, start being unsafe for abuse reasons, emotional manipulation reasons, narcissism, name your reason, if the hearth, the home, and the people in it are not safe, we extrapolate. And as an adult, the world is not safe. If the mommy-daddy matrix of relational ways of being is not safe, with the abandonments, the betrayals, and the broken trusts, we are breeding adults that do not feel safe in the world. And we see a whole series of aberrant behaviors that are unconscious, like needing to control the environment, being rigid, inflexible, domineering, demanding, and manipulative, as I spoke to in one of my earlier videos. So, the relational matrix is where we learn how to form relationships with other people. And so if mommy is highly reactive and unstable, then as an adult, our expectation is the world is an unstable place. And we don't have the opportunity to develop internal stability and safety. So we end up with a solar plexus in a lot of flux. So again, I recognize the complexity here. I will keep going and break it down into elemental components to the best of my ability for you. For healthy emotional development, all children need the consistency of 4 things. Affective attunement, which I have spoken about, around Johnny being deeply impacted by the death of the spider Charlotte for the lovely pig Wilbur in the children's storybook Charlotte's Web. That's a good mom who is affectively attuned. But what if that mother is affectively attuned on Monday, but let's say something similar happens on Tuesday, and the mother's response is completely out of control? Oh, stop that crying. You just always make such a big deal over nothing. You're such a baby. Leave me alone. Grow up. Be a man. Stop that whining and crying. And now here we are. Trauma, story, belief. And the child cannot, for its own survival, it cannot and does not have the capacity in any way, shape, or form to imagine that mommy is wrong. So the child takes the hit. Something's wrong with me. I'm not a good person. I'm too needy. I'm such a baby. And so on. Sad story, brief aside. An ex-husband of mine, I've had 2 husbands, and I currently don't have one now. But my second husband and I used to hang out with some people that we knew that had this great house with an indoor pool in their living room. It was very cool. And the next door neighbor kids always came over, and the little boy who was like, I don't know, 5 or 6, who was chubby at 5 or 6, had an older sister who just kept telling him he was chubby all the time. As a parent of a boy who is now a beautiful young man, children tend to be chubby. After the age of 10, they tend to grow up and thin out. It's developmental. But this boy's sister was relentless in teasing him about being chubby. It was no big deal. It's just what kids do. I mean, it's just how children develop, right? They're typically chubby, and then they get that flush of hormones, and then they get taller and slim down. Well, I didn't see this child for several years, and I saw him when he was about, 11. And I guess the last time I had seen him was around 6 or 7. This child identified as chubby. I saw him when he was 11. I said, oh my gosh, you've grown so much. You look amazing. You're so tall. You're so slender. You look really great. He said, I'm not thin. I'm chubby. Fact. He was quite tall and slender. Fact. He identified with this relentless and ongoing reflection that his older sister kept giving him around being chubby. So even though the actual concrete evidence was there and it didn't support that the child was no longer chubby, the child had made such a strong identification with being chubby that it was impossible for him to see himself clearly as no longer chubby. Very, very sad. It was really sad to me. And so for healthy emotional development, we need consistent parenting. We need affective attunement, empathy, mirroring, and idealizing. Let me go through them for you. As I've explained, affective attunement is for the parent to be attuned, alert, and paying attention to the emotional presentation and the emotional expression of their child. It's very easy for a parent to not be attuned, to make up a story about the child, and then the child identifies with the story that is being mirrored or reflected of them. Now, if we go into a fun house, like a Disneyland or something, it's a space of all kinds of crazy mirrors, and we look 7 feet tall and we look 6 feet wide, and it's all kind of nutty and crazy. And we go in there understanding that I'm not actually 7 feet tall. I'm also not actually 6 feet wide. It's a fun house. It's a warped reflection of myself. And because it's warped, I don't identify with it. It's like, okay, specific time and space, set and setting. I'm in a fun house. When I leave the fun house, I am no longer getting a reflection of being 7 feet tall or 6 feet wide, etc. So let's think about this. We have a child deeply impacted by the death of the spider Charlotte in the book Charlotte's Web. The child comes downstairs, tender and teary, and all of us in childhood are needy, tender, vulnerable, and dependent. Very important. It's part and parcel of the landscape of childhood. Child comes downstairs having a strong emotional experience of itself based on this story. And then we get a reflection, or we get the lack of affective attunement, and the mother says, oh, you're such a crybaby, go outside, don't even bother me with this nonsense, boys don't cry, be a man. Wait till your father gets home and I tell him about this. And we get enough of those experiences, and we start to believe we're a crybaby. We start to believe we are 6 feet wide. We start to believe we are chubby, no matter what the facts are. Whatever is reflected to us on the part of the parents about ourselves is what we will identify with. This is not core identity. This is what it means to be trauma identified. This is what it means to live inside of your trauma, where you become utterly and completely incapable of seeing yourself as you truly are. So you're completely disconnected from core value, core identity, knowing who you really are, because I know that you have come in as a radiant being of light, a fractal, if you will, of source, eternal, itself. You are magnificent, you are splendid, and you deserve to be treated with respect, with honor, with sensitivity and care. And all of us need affective attunement, empathy, mirroring, and idealizing. So we've got affective attunement. I'm beginning to talk to you about what it means to get an inaccurate reflection from the parent. Again, this is the relational matrix of mommy and daddy. So let's say, oh, this actually happened to me. I'll tell you a brief story. When I was 10 years old, my mother and I went shopping, and she bought me 2 outfits to wear. And it was a weekend birthday party. It was a birthday party for me on Saturday morning, and then Sunday we were going to have a big family dinner. So I had all my little girlfriends coming over, my fancy restaurant. It was all very lovely. And my mother and I had gone over what she was also going to wear on that day. So she wanted me to wear one of these 2 brand new outfits, but I didn't want to wear that for the luncheon with my girlfriends. I wanted to wear something different. I wanted to wear the second outfit that she had purchased for my birthday. And what we had agreed upon that she would wear that day, my mother was so egoically fragile, and we'll get into ego development a little bit further along in the video series. But my mother had this one outfit, and I thought it was the ugliest thing ever, and she knew it. And because I did not wear what she wanted me to wear, this was for my 10th birthday, she wore the one thing that I hated. And she told me I was selfish. Selfish because I wanted to wear what I wanted to wear. Selfish because I didn't do what she wanted to do. And my entire life growing up in that household, the reflection that I continued to get from my mother, among others, this one particular one, was that I was selfish. Anytime her narcissistic desire was thwarted by me, as I was attempting to assert, but I like this better, or I don't like that, or I prefer this. Anytime it did not line up with a parent's likes and dislikes, there was a punishment in it for me. The punishment for me was being told I was selfish and having my mother wear the one thing that I thought was the ugliest thing in her entire closet on my birthday, because I wanted to assert my personal taste. So, getting this reflection, you're selfish, you're selfish, you're selfish, you're selfish, the child starts to contort. And sometimes children contort beyond all recognition through multiple trauma, story, belief schemas, through multiple betrayals, abandonments, and broken trusts, through whatever is or isn't working out in the relational matrix of mommy and daddy. Children start to contort to match up to the reflection that they're being given. So all of these many, many, many years that I was told I was selfish, well, I start to act like a selfish person. That's what I'm told I am. And over time, that's what I become. And let's be very clear. This is a trauma-driven contortion. And we are all doing it hundreds and thousands of times. So, affective attunement, mirroring. The mirror that I was continually getting from my mother was about someone that I never was, that has nothing to do with the core identity or my own beating heart and deep spirit. But it had everything to do with what was going on with my mother, a jealous, vindictive, cruel person. This is very important. And I lived my adult life for the longest time inside of multiple contortions, living as if I were someone I was told I was, versus having the support to really allow the blossoming of my essential self to come through. This is really important. So affective attunement, mirroring. The parent is supposed to be an accurate mirror to the child. When we see a baby on the floor stacking blocks and the mommy goes, baby, such a good baby. And the baby looks at the mommy and the baby goes, it's happy with itself. But if we have a baby who is colicky, crying, struggles with certain digestive issues, makes the parent's life more difficult. And if we have a parent who keeps telling that baby, you're so difficult, what's wrong with you? Shut up, stop crying, why are you so difficult? The baby becomes a child who believes it's so difficult. But the issue isn't the baby's issue. The issue is on the capacity of the parent to tolerate what doesn't feel good. Therein lies a projection onto the child. You're like this, you're like that. And children contort to match up to the reflections they're given by mom and dad in this relationship. It's very important. So then we're looking at empathy. Let's talk about empathy. Empathy is the capacity to feel into what the experience must be like for the other person. We have compassion and empathy, and they sort of go together hand in hand. We want to be empathetic to the vulnerable, dependent, and needy experience that all children have. But sometimes parents were shamed, blamed, treated harshly, and humiliated because of their own neediness, dependency, and vulnerability, so that by the time they're an adult, they can't come up with any empathy for their own children. And every time they are with their children and their children really drop into that acute vulnerability that is part of our all children's experience, their parent can become very harsh, very punishing, very shaming, because what that does is activates the parent's own unconscious, unhealed wounds about their own vulnerability. I see it far too often. You know, I go to Trader Joe's and I see a 4-year-old crying, and I overhear a father saying, if you'll stop that crying right now, I'm going to give you something to really cry about. I feel compelled to make an intervention. I feel compelled to speak up for the child who cannot speak up for itself. Mirroring, empathy, affective attunement, and idealizing. Idealizing, what do you think that means? It means that the parent continues to fuel the child with its own goodness. When I was holding my infant son, and I would look into the baby's eyes and I would say, Mommy loves you, Mommy loves you. And it's a direct transmission through my ocular receptors into the ocular receptors of this baby, who takes in that goodness, who's able to experience itself as part of the great eternal good that simply is. But what if I was a parent and every time my child cried, I looked into that child's eyes and I said, you're so difficult, shut up. I see that all the time. Stop crying. If you don't stop crying, I'm going to give you something to cry about. I'm going to smack you in front of all these people. We contort. If we have inconsistent parenting, which is part of what I had, you know, a mother on Monday who's loving, kind, and safe, but on Tuesday is punitive, screaming, erratic, reactive, yelling. There's the constancy of the shifting sands of stability and stability, stability and stability. And what's so important here is to understand the value of this relational matrix. It impacts everyone's capacity to build healthy relationships with other people as adults. And we start to see it show up in childhood through aberrant behavior of children. This is so important that we understand this. Without affective attunement, empathy, mirroring, and idealizing, you're the best baby ever. You're so smart. You're so funny. I love you so much. It's rare that as children we're getting all of this on any degree of consistency. If we're lucky, we get some inconsistently. And for many, many, many of the walking wounded, we get none of this at all. We got harsh parents because they can't tolerate what it feels like to see their own child in the depth of its vulnerable distress, because it activates that same vulnerability on the part of the parent. And because we're talking about trauma, we're talking about the great uncomfortable, the dreaded uncomfortable, we have parents that want to shut down and shut up their children so that they don't have to tolerate the depth of their own discomfort. Very important.